Welcome back, handsome viewers. Yesterday saw the conclusion of CitizenCon Day 2. Yeah, we streamed the event again. We had, unfortunately, Nerve wasn't able to partake this time around. He had prior engagements, but we had It's Not Fair, Major Star Stuff, Riot, Crowbits and Quaz, Gadu, the usual Voidyvid suspect pulled in for, in and out during the streams. It was a lot of fun. Once again, thank you to those handsome viewers who pulled in for the duration of the stream. Really appreciate it. We had a good time. Hope you did too. So yeah, back to CitizenCon. We saw a lot yesterday. It was an incredible amount of information to digest over the 3 or so panels, whatever it was. I'm still kind of contemplating, am I going to do this video in 3 parts or 2 parts or 1 part? I think, yeah, we'll do a summary of the entire day. I've got my notes ready. Let's begin. So we kicked off with crafting, and this is kind of a massive deal. So crafting all begins with blueprints. You get your blueprint, then what do you do with it? How do you even get the blueprint in the first place, right? So they've stated now, and again, I'm going to preface this with the fact that this stuff seems far away. We're not getting this tomorrow. A lot of this might change, right? This is their design intent, right? And as meaningless or as meaningful as that might be for a lot of Star Citizens, at least they've gone and put this whole thing into a package, put a little bow on it and said, this is what we want to accomplish, for like the 1.0 sort of release eventually. So when we start seeing this come online, how much time and patches there will be between now and, 1.0, between 4.0 and 1.0, or even between 3.2, 4.3 and, 3.242 and 4.0, time will tell. These goalposts seem to be ever shifting forward. But I must say, before we actually go too deep into this, the mood that we left this day 2 with was a lot higher, right? Almost to the degree where it's like, man, that squadron game, I'll wait for this game as long as it takes, kind of a thing, because this is the type of gameplay that I personally am so happy to see that they're actually considering, that they want to implement, that they have a plan for it. Kind of like Eve, I guess, to a lot of degree. It's basically going to be it's Eve with high fidelity, right? It seems like a correct way to be going. Anyway, let's kick off with crafting. Crafting, you start off with your blueprints. They're acquired from rep rewards, bought or looted, or content in the game could reward you with a blueprint. Some and should obviously be challenging to find, right? So over 1,000 blueprints for players to collect. It's kind of like, oh, you're just, ticking all the achievement boxes in like a World of Warcraft or something like this, because once you acquire that blueprint, it is then claimed. Hopefully before you claim it, you can transfer it, give it to people, sell it, that type of stuff, if you're not interested in the blueprint. But then once claimed, it is now bound to your character. There's not a lot of, they don't really distinguish between, does character bound mean account bound? There was no further clarification on this. So who knows? He said it'll be associated with you forever, your character forever, but then he did use the word character. So there's a little room for interpretation there, or at least, hopefully some clarification from their side. We'll probably deep dive into this in the coming weeks, months, whatever, with, your high seas and stuff like this. But yeah, so that's where your blueprints come from. All content in the game could reward you with a blueprint. And that is just that. Makes it very going off and exploring a random outpost, or going and doing like, Xenothreat or something like this. You could potentially somehow stumble across blueprints, or at least that sounds like what they intend. And this is a minor thing added to your so-called loot pool during any activity during the game, and you could get something as exciting as a blueprint. Very cool. We love to see it. So now, how does the crafting actually work, right? To craft an item, you need access to the appropriate blueprint and the materials, and then by using a fabricator to make the thing you're making, right? So fabricators come in 3 types. For now, at least, these are the ones that they mentioned. You've got a nutrient, a chemical, and an item fabricator. And these items themselves, these actual fabricators, will come in different tiers, right? So apparently, a tier 3 fabricator, a tier 3 item fabricator would affect how well the fabricator fabricates. And, again, no further clarification on what that actually means. Does that just mean a speed increase? Would a tier 3 fabricator make an item better than a tier 1 fabricator? Again, they didn't really go too depth into that statement that fabricators have tiers, right? Regarding the materials acquired, so these are like your raw resources that you're acquiring and then refining into a material, right? So you go and harvest mining stuff, or whatever lootables, pearls from the sandworms, horns from the copions, this type of thing. They come in various qualities. Those are your resources. These now then need to be refined into materials, and then the materials are what you use to craft. This is where a lot of survival-esque games start to become sort of interesting with regards to, are there going to be certain recipes that need the raw material themselves and not just a processed material, a refined material, right? So it's like, oh, do you go and blast through all your copion horns and turn them into like some kind of nanoparticle thing used for medical equipment? Or do you save some of those copium horns because in their raw format they might, help you make a cool helmet? You know what I'm saying? So hopefully not everything gets refined, right? Not everything has to be refined. We'll see how the system plays out eventually, but that's where my thoughts tended to go. And these materials themselves will come in varying degrees of quality. The better the quality, the better the stats of the item that you craft. So some items could have options for what materials to use, right? So one item might need iron instead of steel, or copper instead of gold. And then this decision on what materials you use to craft the item can change the stats, right? So not necessarily be better or worse, just different, right? Then they started to go on to research, right? Now through researching to upgrade blueprints, items can be crafted at 3 different tier levels, meaning you can use the same quality materials but get a higher tier item with better base stats thanks to the amount of research you've done with a blueprint, right? This is how they've sort of described this. Upgraded blueprints let you also use more advanced materials for crafting specialized items. And then they did mention that you could go back, right? So if you researched a blueprint, you can always craft the lower tier or the lower base stat version of that item first. So just with this, you can see the exponential knock-on effect with the degree at which you can start customizing stuff based on the materials. Certain items might have different types of materials that you don't have to use other materials for. Those materials have various degrees of quality. And this gets, super deep, super quickly, which is incredibly awesome, because this is what a game of this fidelity certainly might require to at least, retain some form of interest with players, right? This immediately starts making things feel very customizable, and for me, I want it to become like the guy who's going to make the best railguns in the verse type of thing, right? This is awesome stuff. So now, how does one actually go about upgrading a blueprint? And they basically just mentioned that there are various ways to actually upgrade to physically upgrade the blueprint. You use a research data bank, which sounds like some kind of item you would build in your bases or whatever. This thing's going to upgrade your blueprints to craft higher items. The act of performing research might basically be a checklist of crafting goals. So this is one of the examples that they gave. So they used the example of creating 100 volt pistols and then 1 volt pistol with an increased fire rate, likely from creating the pistol with different resources, and an optional requirement of eliminating 5 players with the volt pistol for a minus 10% research rate buff to the speed at which you'll sort of research that. Now, that felt very MMO, very grindy, very cool. Let's become the captain of industry and pump out 100 sort of volt pistols, or 100 omni-ski size 5s, or God forbid one day craft 100 Idrises, and then you can craft your tier 2 Idris or your tier 3 Idris, right? This is, again, it really is going to boil down to that long-term balance of how they want the crafting system to work. So you can start seeing it become very gamey, but also very cool for the implementation in Star Citizen. At least that's how I feel about it right now. Again, I like to bring things back to a sense of practicality. How is this actually going to play out? What are the stat sheet of numbers and how long all the stuff should take that they're going to be working with and balancing over the years. This is what we're hopefully going to see more of in the coming weeks and months. Other acts of performing research, so instead of just crafting 100 volt pistols, might be collecting resources, accomplishing certain missions, or acquiring the research data from the Science Guild, and there'll be more on that later. Research is meant to be time intensive. So blueprints are digital. Once you claim one, it's added to your personal library. We've discussed this already. Persistent to your character, and once yours, it's yours forever. Unclear if this is account bound or character bound, cannot be stolen or traded once claimed. So who knows if, when Death of the Spaceman kicks in and you've got to form your new character to, then go and pay your tax and inherit everything that you owned before, what happens to all your blueprints? Are these account bound or are they character bound? Hopefully somebody who was on the floor there and got to speak to a dev managed to get some clarity on that, because that is an interesting little bit of information. So basically, if you want to craft the best railgun, get out there and explore, right? They didn't use the railgun as an example. They used some other weapon or something. But you need the best quality radar to find the best quality materials, but I can't find the best quality radar because I don't have the best quality radar to find the best quality materials to build the radar. So you can see that there becomes this little circle, but maybe that's the whole point, right? Is to get that best radar in the first place, trade, steal, and explore your way to crafting that perfect radar in the first place, right? So you can start seeing how little character goals become like a thing with the system, and I'm happy to see it at least verbalized by CIG, right? So time will tell, but it's a good start. Then they jumped into refining. So once you have your materials, you need to refine them, and there are refining blueprints, right? So of that 1,000 or over 1,000 blueprints that they talk about, that includes refining blueprints, right? So refining requires primary, secondary, and catalyst resources to produce refined materials. Apparently the catalyst is optional. That will just be like some kind of boost to speed, or I don't know if it'll impact the quality of the item or stats or anything like that. So they boiled this down into one simple rule. The quality of the primary raw material determines the quality of the refined material. So that would be like your, things that impact your stats. The secondary raw material impacts the time of refinement, and a catalyst, which is optional, further influences the speed of refinement. So basically in the example given, if you want the perfect steel, you need high quality iron ore. Your secondary material is carbon. That's going to be the thing that burns up to process that ore. The quality of that carbon doesn't really impact the quality of the steel that you eventually produce. It'll just impact the time or the efficiency, right? So you'll just need more low quality carbon or less high quality carbon for the same result, right? This is kind of similar to a lot of, I'm thinking of like Age of Conan and stuff like this. It seems to be, along that similar sort of trend. I haven't played too much EVE myself. I only played that game like years and years ago, so I'm not too sure if this resonates with that. So then I was thinking, where do the fabricators themselves come from? Do we fabricate our own fabricators? I might have missed this throughout the panels, so let me know down in the comments if you understand where fabricators come from. I don't think I ever saw a fabricator actually being produced. I remember the one demo during the base building panel, he just kind of walked in and a fabricator was just there. So you probably used the craft cart, the mobile craft cart, whatever it was, or one of these building vehicles coming later to build the fabricator itself. We'll see. Or probably the Pioneer, who knows. Yeah, then they sort of rounded that off by saying that with over 1,000 refining and crafting blueprints, they expect players to collaborate and specialize, right? So, hey, I know a guy who's good at building ships. This guy knows a guy who's good at building components, and off you go and you collaborate to make the best Hornets or whatever it is, right? It really made me sort of think about starting the Voidy Vids Railgun Emporium one day, so that railguns don't harmlessly bounce off your targets like this piece of shit tier -69 railgun I'm using here in 3.24.2 live. I played a little bit after CitizenCon, and apparently railguns are just broken right now, so maybe one day I can make railguns that actually work. They want crafting to impact the entire game, from economy to player trade and long-term progression, and it forms the foundation of base building. So this is kind of tapping into how we've always said what we've got now, how will they make all these bought ships have some form of progression, right? You've gone and bought, some players have got like massive fleets that they've just swiped their credit cards for. How do these guys get any sense of progression outside of like money and buying more ships, right? So this ticks that checkbox in a, I think for now, a very satisfying way, right? It seems deep enough. Ships go up to tier 5, components and stuff, items, all this kind of good juicy progression that that seems on the horizon, and it's all impacted by just making items better, making things more effective, more powerful, affecting things like rate of fire, recoil, speed to quantum, all this type of stuff. So super exciting. After that, they moved on to base building. The base building, they demoed this using a construction craft cart. This thing, basically, when you use it, obviously this UI and stuff was not final art or whatever you want to call it. It surveys the land and gives you a Command and Conquer sort of style interface where you've got this, very, very high view that you seem to be able to control. I assume that, during this, you'll be your camera will actually be the drone, right? I assume that when he actually opened this thing, a drone flies out and you go into the drone, and this thing is what you use to sort of place, and it begins the 3D printing sort of thing. They refer to this as the augmented reality mode. So this is their strategy view. This might eventually tie into like the command globe type stuff that they spoke about. But that, I don't know, this all seems very much far down the track. So using this mode, they placed and built structures, and mentioned that, you keep them maintained and supplied with fuel and things like this. So you'll be like replacing relays and other forms of like maintenance probably down the track. When you place this building, it needs to be powered, right? And it uses the same resource network stuff that we've seen in the ship-based engineering gameplay. So nice to see what I would maybe refer to as like systems that are systemic, right? And this might lead to more emergent gameplay down the line with bases and ships and stuff like this, so very exciting. The commodity containers that were lying around the base, they mentioned that these kind of just automatically get consumed while you're building, and they're just sort of lying around the base. So I'm assuming that as soon as a resource, all your iron and steel and tin or whatever it is that you need to build a structure, that just automatically gets consumed, right? So this is kind of like, if you've played any other survival games, that quality of life of not having to put everything in the correct chest and then, from that chest into your inventory, and then you go and craft the thing. It's basically like radius based, hopefully. Massive quality of life. Nobody wants to go around running to the same box 90 times to craft a pistol, you know what I'm saying? So hopefully that's just a baseline, the immersion buck stops there, and they don't keep on passing it down to make these things even more and more high fidelity as we go down. We'll see. So they used a fuel generator, which was supplying a constant supply of fuel to this base to keep the lights on, kind of a thing. I'm guessing that the fabricator is what we'll use to make our own sort of fuels and stuff like this later. Maybe there'll be players out there who make the best quality quantum fuel for the most efficient quantum jumps ever. They also hinted at other ways to power your base, so probably cleaner, more efficient ways. Let's go clean energy. Then they upped the scale and go full industry mode and demoed a construction hub that was built by an off-screen pioneer. They didn't actually show that process. The construction hub just appeared there as that sort of presentation started. This now allowed access to small, medium, and large buildings, and I think it's the size of the drones associated with a vehicle or a building that allow you to build bigger stuff. And this is apparently going to range from small, medium, large, all the way up to XL. So things are going to get pretty big. This is like your org scale stuff. This opened up construction to access large building like fabrication hangars, freight elevators that hopefully won't break, and various types of resource extractors, meaning your base's location matters and could allow access to solid, water, or gas resources to be extracted and refined just by being placed at that particular spot during the surveillance phase. So it sounds like this is restricting it to one resource type per base, right? So this is going to be some kind of like, oh, you chose to build this base over a solid, right? So maybe ore or some kind of mineral, then you've always got this passive extraction just by the fact that you chose to build your base there. So this is kind of cool, where who knows if this is an infinite passive thing or a limited thing. Eventually your base dries up, but it sounds like you could go and build 3 bases to get a solid, a gas, and a liquid off of these just by the fact that you built there, right? So to me it sounded like a passive sort of resource generation. Your entire base becomes a node that just continuously generates that resource over time. Yeah, very cool. After seeing the guys pull out to this org scale construction on the ground, it really started to feel like you could actually spend weeks of gameplay at an org base and just accomplish stuff and make progress and never even leave the base for weeks, right? So the non-combat aspect is really starting to become visualized here, and that's super exciting for so many people. And if you start to couple this with what we've seen of the base building, the crafting, and then add the engineering and stuff like that, just those 3 components, Star Citizen already becomes like infinitely more deep than it is today. So from a gameplay perspective, man, things are starting to feel quite exciting, and again, I'll preface everything, 12 to 18 months I think is what Chris said, but again, Star Citizen just seems to take its time, man. So with regarding everything that we saw here, can you imagine like hijacking or stealing a Hull C or D filled with resources that some org had just curated before sending to their base to initiate a massive construction endeavor, not the ship, and build this base, and then you steal that ship with those resources all already curated for you, right? All that cargo is now yours. You either hold it for ransom or use it to make your own base somewhere else with blackjack and hookers, and supplement your base building and crafting endeavors, from literally being a dirty pirate, right? So what I'm saying with this is the purpose of stealing stuff is no longer just translated to credits. If you have your own goals as a pirate, it's like, man, I don't want to go and mine all this shit. I just want to steal a Hull C filled with the requirements, filled with the mats preloaded for me by some chump, and then go and start your base somewhere, right? Like that's kind of a very enticing thought. Then they spoke about setting up shops in these bases that we're going to be building. So, the actual bases will act as hubs for trade. Really want to see the practical application of this. Like, is it really going to be worth someone's time to go to a particular spot to buy somebody's particular armor? Hopefully with all the crafting and stat stuff that we've just seen, that truly does become the case, right? But it's always going to be a game of time. How long until everybody has everything and everybody has all 1,000 plus blueprints, right? Then all of this kind of stuff starts to fall apart. So it really does just matter on the practical application and the timing of this entire system and how long they want players to take to accomplish certain things for this type of stuff to start happening. And this kind of also justifies the BMM's existence. It becomes the mobile base of trade as opposed to a static base of trade owned by players. So that, kind of exciting. I'm not much of a BMM guy. I don't care two ways about the ship. It would be nice to pirate it and have all that juicy loot, but we'll see. And then they prefaced the crafting stuff by heavily implying that all of this crafted stuff will be the most powerful in the game, hopefully providing the incentive necessary to get players invested in all this crafting and base building insanity, because it was a lot. Then they detailed base buildings that are still in concept, such as low-tech and high-tech farming and hydroponics for exclusive strains of plants. This might be the start of some kind of player-run drug economy, alongside whatever animals produce and whatever plants you grow. If you start associating all the plant and farming stuff with the research blueprint stuff, because that is apparently going to give you, various exclusive strains of plants, this might where we start developing or producing that grade A Jumptonian maize, or maybe that's more chemical fabricator stuff, who knows. Then they started to talk about sort of base defenses, how you're going to protect these places. There seems to be like automatic stuff and the difference between high sec and unlawful territory for building your bases, which led to this discussion on, it actually was in the last panel. They started to talk about this planetary tech with this company called Seal, and this seems like, I think Tyra used the word soft infrastructure. This is probably going to be the thing that governs or maintains org versus org gameplay throughout places like Pyro, right? Where you've got this like token system, and the org with the most tokens after a week will maintain the planetary shield, and then maybe they're invulnerable for that week. That's kind of what it sounded like. It was a bit of a deeper system, so I'll probably make a deeper dive video into that later. Need to just wrap my head around it properly and just truly understand how it works. So yeah, that's a video for another day. Then they jumped into the ship panel. They spoke about ground vehicles, the new grav cart, and then this, the Argo CSV construction vehicle, various drones. These drones are going to be used to perform the act of actually 3D printing your buildings, coming, from small to extra large type of stuff, or maybe just small to large for the drones. Then there was the new Starlancer range. I played Starlancer before Freelancer. I remember back in the day, it was a pretty cool game. That was like, the way I see it is like Starlancer is to Squadron 42 as Freelancer is to the PU, if anybody remembers Starlancer. 3 variants of the Starlancer: the Bold for building, the Attack for attacking, and the Max for lifting cargo. I'm not much of a ship guy, guys. If I see it in the game and fly one, I'll maybe steal one and use the council to deactivate the dead man switch, and that's as far as that goes for me. I do like the Misk aesthetic though. I think they're pretty sick ships. Then they showed a bunch more ships coming soon. Looked like a Crusader starter, some kind of medical Crusader vehicle, 1 or 2 other interesting ones as well as the Polaris. But then we moved on to the final panel, which is the 1.0 Stars Our Destination panel. Here they outlined the full comprehensive vision of what Star Citizen 1.0 means, and according to the presentation, that is improved performance, a polished experience, finished gameplay loops, and no more resets. I can't remember the last time they reset the game, so great. They basically just described what a launch is. Like, this is, I don't understand why. I understand why they made a big deal. It's probably to like just put a pin in all the discussions and like, but they promised this in the Kickstarter 9,000 years ago, and they're basically just saying this is what 1.0 is, this is what it contains, this is what the game is now, deal with it type of thing. Then they spoke about like the 0.0, and that's just continued development after 1.0, which basically means no more tier 0 features, higher benchmark for quality, and apparently it's a moment in time. Everything is a moment in time if you think about it, but to them it means that anything that's not in yet will get in later. Yeah, that okay, makes sense, I guess. Then they introduced the idea of the main story quest. This is what is referred to as the MSQ in lots of MMOs. You go and jump into Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft or something like this. You've got the main story quest, which basically gives you the narrative and offers you more an immersive way to experience the universe and tell a story within the universe. This is also going to be sort of supplemented by sort of side quests and stuff like this. I think we all kind of knew this would exist to a degree. Not the main story quest. That was, I think, fresh news for a lot of people. But but we always knew that you'd be going to a landing zone and talking to somebody like Wallace Klim or Miles Eckhart and doing more handcrafted quests. But the main story quest was kind of like, well, they're actually extracting what Squadron 42 was going to serve as and provide you with your citizenship at the end of the campaign and give you benefits in the PU. They're extracting that out of Squadron and applying it to the main story quest within Star Citizen itself. So that was a bit of a change. Will they reach the same quality bar that they have for Squadron 42? Time will tell, I guess. It will be cool to have, see these types of things in action. But again, I like to steer away from games that suffer from the one syndrome, where, everybody's the hero type of thing. Star Citizen feels like you're very much just a cog in the machine, and I hope that they lean into that quite heavily. Then they detailed the absolutely insane amount of companies and factions and things that make up these guilds, right? Bounty hunting guild, monster hunting, exploration, science, trade. What I thought was highlighting here was the council, which is like the criminal guild, the thieves guild from like a game like Morrowind or Skyrim or something like that. These guys are the antithesis of the mercenary guild, and these guys are going to basically allow you to fence ships or transfer ownership of title deeds, this type of stuff. And it seems like, cool, now you've got a gameplay loop for stealing ships. You've got options when you steal a ship. They're more exciting what they are now. That's all that matters, right? You can eventually actually make that ship yours. So very cool. Hopefully there's a bit of a discount there. If you put in all the effort to steal some Org's tier 5 Idris with the best components and best weapons and best everything, I want to go now, transfer the title deed for that ship. Is it going to be cheaper than buying an Idris legally? Right? These are the type of things that I'm interested in seeing. What's the practical application of this? Apparently it's going to be rep gated behind the council. Then they started to touch on like player loss, death of a spaceman, and insurance stuff. Apparently there's going to be like 3 tiers of warranty now. I'm not sure what the LTI means now. Is the LTI form part of those 3 tiers? Is LTI now some kind of lifetime warranty? It wasn't too clear to me. Maybe you can help me out in the comments. This also might be a little bit of a video for another day, because I'm very not clued up on exactly how this works. So we'll move on. They highlighted a gameplay progression example, which I thought was a bit weird. So essentially they used the example of buying a ship that you can't buy because it's a military grade ship, right? So they basically said you're a player who owns a prospector and your goal is this military grade Hornet that you can't buy. So you can only craft it, right? So what if they used literally any other ship as an example here that wasn't military grade? This whole loop would be a lot smaller, or you just go and swipe your credit card, right? So I questioned this, but they highlighted this progression path to make this happen, what the grind looks like. You go from your prospector to grinding out cash to buy a Mustang. You use the Mustang to go and do bounty hunter stuff. Then you get the the rep unlock eventually to then come back and eventually lead down some kind of track to eventually lead to the blueprint that contains the Hornet, right? I just thought it was weird that they used the military Hornet as an example. What if they used a civilian Idris as an example? What would that loop have looked like, right? I mean, it does kind of make sense, because as Dread Pirate Crobits in my chat pointed out, one of the Voidyvid's usuals, he highlighted that the average Star Citizen has pledged about $135 US. So progression tracks like this do make sense. I just thought it was weird they could have used a different example, because that was a very particular crafting example for a military grade thing. If it was a Terrapin, it would be a much different, sort of smaller and less grindy endeavor, I guess. Then they started to break down sort of the way high sec and low sec works. They spoke about how if a player who gets attacked in high sec space needs to hold out for a bit until help arrives. This is going to be like NPC help because of the high sec nature of the zone. I struggle to visualize this. If you've got a guy in an eclipse and he just rocks up and one taps your Aurora, there's no hold out gameplay there. So I really wonder the response times. If somebody wants to destroy you, they will find a way to destroy you, right? Really remains to be seen what the actual real life practical application and the experience will be like one day. Then they blew everybody away with player built, run and owned space stations as the ultimate endgame, with a shipyard that built a Bengal carrier. This is when my mind exploded. If you consider everything that preceded this, the depth at which crafting seems to be operating at, this gets crazy, right? And these, they want this to take like months and months and months to sort of accomplish. So it makes sense, because they're sitting in this position where they've got orgs in the game with thousands and thousands of active and mostly inactive players. This is going to give them more stuff to do, and this is exactly what the game needed. I'm a simple man. After seeing all this stuff, I just wanted to retreat to my, camping spot on Brios and blast people with railguns and steal their sex eggs, man. So, yeah. I love what we've seen. Lot to process. overall, day 2 left me with a much more optimistic view of the future of Star Citizen. Of course, a lot of the stuff seems very, very, very far away. Feels a lot, when they start getting to the space station level and the, building your own Bengal carrier level of stuff, maybe lost a few people, feels very pie in the sky. It's definitely guilty of taking forever to make progress in Star Citizen, but undeniably, there is progress. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.